The Ancient Warning. Final Chronicle. 6 months after the first human victory at New Geneva, the Galactic Council chambers on Zephyria Prime had become a fortress under siege. Energy shields flickered around the planetary capital, while automated defense systems tracked thousands of incoming contacts. The human fleet had arrived not as conquering invaders, but as something far more terrifying. Liberators with a comprehensive plan for galactic reformation. Chief Archivist Velthar shuffled through the ruins of his once pristine archives, now serving as a makeshift command center for the Council's remaining leadership. The irony was not lost on him that the warnings he had spent his life preserving were now being vindicated in the most catastrophic way possible. Admiral Krexth, his scales now permanently scarred from the injuries sustained during his flagship's destruction, stared at the tactical displays with the hollow eyes of a being who had witnessed the impossible. The human advance had been unlike anything in recorded galactic history, not a simple military conquest, but a fundamental transformation of the power structure that had maintained peace for millennia. "Status report," he croaked, his voice damaged from the atmospheric breach that had nearly killed him during the retreat from New Geneva. Commander Yathara, one of the few surviving fleet officers, consulted her datapad with trembling appendages. The human fleet has established siege positions around 47 Council member worlds. They're not attacking the planets directly, but they've systematically destroyed every military installation, orbital platform, and defensive array in each system. "Casualties?" Krexth asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Military losses are approaching 90% across all member species. But Admiral," she paused, her voice carrying confused disbelief, "civilian casualties remain minimal. The humans appear to be deliberately avoiding non-combatant targets." Velthar looked up from his ancient records, his compound eyes reflecting the glow of emergency lighting. "That's consistent with the historical pattern. The ancients noted the same phenomenon. Humans waged total war against military forces while showing unexpected restraint toward civilian populations." "Restraint?" Admiral Krexth's laugh was bitter and harsh. "They've crippled our entire civilization. Half the galaxy's trade routes are under human control, and they're dictating terms to species that were exploring space when their ancestors were still discovering fire. And yet," Velthar continued quietly, "civilian shipping continues to operate under human protection. Medical supplies are being delivered to worlds that can no longer defend themselves. They're not conquering us, Admiral. They're replacing us." The view screen at the center of the command area flickered to life, displaying an incoming transmission request. The identifier showed it originating from the human flagship Excellence, which had positioned itself in orbit around Zephyria Prime like a metallic moon. The vessel was massive beyond comprehension, a city-sized construct bristling with weapons that had been built specifically to kill Council ships. "Answer it," Krexth ordered, his dignity as battered as his body, but his duty intact. The image that appeared on screen showed a human woman in her middle years, wearing a simple uniform devoid of excessive decoration. Her expression was calm, almost maternal, but her eyes held the weight of absolute authority. Velthar recognized her from intelligence reports as Admiral Rebecca Foster, the architect of humanity's galactic campaign. "Greetings, members of the former Galactic Council." Admiral Foster's voice carried across the chamber with conversational ease. "I trust you've had time to consider our proposed restructuring of galactic governance." "Former Council?" Krexth struggled to maintain his composure. "You have no authority to dissolve institutions that have maintained galactic peace for over 1,000 years. Admiral Foster's smile was patient, but unyielding. "Admiral Krexth, I'm not dissolving anything. I'm simply pointing out that your ability to enforce Council authority ceased to exist when your fleets were neutralized. We're not here as conquerors. We're here as the new management. You cannot govern species you don't understand. Ambassador Nathara interjected, her ethereal form shimmering with agitation. The complexity of maintaining galactic civilization requires centuries of diplomatic experience and cultural knowledge. Ambassador, Foster replied respectfully, we're not planning to micromanage galactic civilization. We're establishing new principles that ensure no species can threaten another's right to exist and expand. The Council's greatest failure was believing that galactic peace required human containment. Velthar stepped forward, his ancient frame trembling with the weight of accumulated knowledge. Admiral Foster, I've studied the historical records. I know what happened to the ancients. Are you here to complete what your species began millennia ago? Admiral Foster's expression softened slightly as she focused on the elderly archivist. Chief Archivist Velthar, isn't it? I've read your warnings about humanity. Quite insightful, though I notice you missed a crucial detail in your translation of the ancient records. What detail? Velthar asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. The ancients weren't destroyed by humanity, Foster explained. They were absorbed. When they realized that military containment was impossible and that humans represented an evolutionary step forward, they chose integration over extinction. Most humans today carry ancient genetic markers. We didn't destroy their civilization, we became their inheritors. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. The most advanced species in galactic history hadn't been conquered by primitive humans. They had voluntarily merged with them, recognizing something in humanity that transcended technological superiority. That's impossible, Admiral Krexth protested. The genetic compatibility alone would be irrelevant, Foster interrupted gently. Admiral, you're still thinking in terms of biological limitations. The ancients understood that evolution isn't just about genetic adaptation. They recognized humans as something new, a species that could adapt faster than their environment could change. Velthar's mind raced through the implications. The warnings weren't about destruction, they were about transformation. The ancients weren't trying to prevent human expansion, they were preparing other species for integration. Exactly, Foster confirmed. The galaxy is entering a new phase of development, one that requires the kind of adaptability and determination that humans have perfected over millions of years of survival on a hostile world. Species that can work with us will thrive. Those that insist on maintaining the old order will find themselves increasingly irrelevant. The tactical displays around the chamber updated to show human fleets systematically dismantling the infrastructure of galactic control. Military bases were being converted into research facilities. Weapons platforms were being rebuilt as orbital manufacturing centers. Trade routes were being reorganized to eliminate the bureaucratic bottlenecks that had enriched the Council while limiting member species development. What are your demands? Admiral Krexth asked, his voice carrying the defeat of a being who had finally understood the scope of his defeat. No demands, Foster replied simply. Invitations. Every species in the galaxy is invited to participate in the new galactic community. The only requirement is that you abandon the idea that advancement requires the suppression of other species' potential. Commander Yathara consulted her datapad again before speaking. Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human forces are providing technological assistance to primitive civilizations, medical aid to plague worlds, and engineering support for species attempting their first interstellar colonies. They're accelerating galactic development, Velthar realized. Instead of maintaining the careful balance that prevented rapid change, they're actively promoting expansion and advancement. Foster nodded approvingly. Archivist, you understand the pattern. Humanity doesn't just adapt to environments. We transform them. We're applying the same principle to galactic civilization. In 50 years, every species willing to embrace progress will have achieved technological and cultural advancement that would have taken centuries under the Council system. And those who refuse? Ambassador Nithara asked quietly. We'll be left alone to pursue their chosen path, Foster replied. We're not interested in forcing progress on unwilling populations, but we won't allow them to prevent others from advancing either. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the surviving council members. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy through military might alone. They had presented an alternative vision of civilization that made the old order obsolete. Species across the galaxy were already choosing sides, and most were choosing the promise of unlimited advancement over the security of managed stagnation. The transition will take approximately 1 standard year, Foster continued. During that time, human administrative teams will work with willing member species to establish the new governmental framework. Those who prefer to maintain their current systems are free to do so within their own territories. Admiral Krex struggled with the concepts being presented. You're dismantling an order that has maintained galactic peace for millennia and replacing it with... What? Chaos, Foster admitted cheerfully. Beautiful, creative, productive chaos. The peace you maintained was the peace of a museum, Admiral, static, carefully controlled, and ultimately sterile. Humans prefer the peace that comes from everyone being too busy building the future to waste time fighting over the past. Velthar accessed his personal archives. Pulling up the final fragments of ancient records he had never been able to translate completely. With new understanding, the symbols began to make sense, revealing messages of hope rather than warnings of doom. The ancient's final message, he said softly. It wasn't a warning about destruction. It was an invitation to transcendence. They saw humans as the catalyst for galactic evolution, the force that would push civilization beyond its natural limitations. Which brings us to you, Archivist, Foster said, her attention focusing on Velthar with laser intensity. Humanity values knowledge and those who preserve it. We'd like to offer you a position in the new Galactic Archive system. Your expertise with ancient records would be invaluable in helping other species understand their place in the coming transformation. The offer was unexpected, and Velthar felt his worldview shifting once again. You want me to help other species adapt to human dominance? Not dominance, Foster corrected. Partnership. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Archivist. We want to explore it, understand it, and help it reach its full potential. That requires the wisdom and knowledge of every species willing to contribute. Around the chamber, the remaining council members were receiving similar offers. Not surrender terms or loyalty oaths, but invitations to participate in building something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization based on unlimited growth rather than careful balance. What about those who resist? Admiral Krexith asked, his military mind still focused on potential conflicts. Foster's expression remained patient, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Admiral, resistance requires the ability to present a viable alternative. The council system failed because it prioritized stability over progress. Any species that wants to return to that model is welcome to try, but they'll discover that the rest of the galaxy has moved beyond their limitations. The meeting continued for hours as the details of the transition were discussed, but the outcome was never in doubt. Humanity had won not just a military victory, but something far more devastating. They had made the old order irrelevant. The galaxy was entering an age of unprecedented expansion and development. Driven by the same restless energy that had taken humans from a single world to the stars in just a few centuries. As the transmission ended and the council members dispersed to consider their options, Velthar remained in the ruins of his archives. The ancient warnings had been fulfilled, but not as anyone had expected. The humans had indeed brought an end to the old age, but they had also offered the beginning of something far more magnificent. Looking up at the stars through the chamber's transparent ceiling, Velthar could see human ships moving between the planets like mobile cities, carrying the tools and knowledge needed to transform entire civilizations. The galaxy would never again know the quiet peace of managed stagnation, but it would experience something far more valuable, the endless excitement of unlimited possibility. The ancients had been right to welcome humanity's rise. They were the force that would push galactic civilization beyond every limitation, carrying all willing species with them toward a future that no single world could have imagined. The age of careful balance was ending, and the age of magnificent chaos had begun.